Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 30. What you just heard was me actually doubting my competence as a podcast host, which is an excellent segue into the topic that we have today, which is talking about the idea of success, the idea of competence, achievement, in an era where everyone's success and competence and achievement are on the internet for the whole world to see. This topic was suggested to us by our wonderful panelist, Archie, so I thought I'd give him the floor to sort of frame this discussion and where we're going to go with it.
Yeah, so we've all sort of suggested topics since this panel's been a thing, and I've been obsessed with this idea for a while now of kind of how our ideas of personal achievement, attainment, success, competence have changed now that everyone can see what everyone else is doing, and what that means for success in the traditional sense, how it always was in terms of careers, academia, how that's changed now that a lot more is democratized and we can see what everyone else is doing at any given time, and moments of success on the internet are so much shorter than say the prolonged fame that may have happened without social media. So I guess if I pose a question to the panel, we're all students, so if we start with academia, so in academia, what do you guys consider successful for you? What do you guys consider, or what do you guys think that other people think is successful? Why are you doing what you're doing? So I'll pass that over to you guys. Let's go with Milda.
Oh no, please no. I can just share my experience as a student, because I really don't think I'm competent enough to answer about academia, and no pun intended about the topic of the episode, of course, here. But, well, in general, I think this topic is perfect for me, kind of drifting away a bit from your question, because even though I felt in my childhood and teenage years always extremely rewarded and supported by my parents for my achievements, because I did do a lot of different things, I still feel like I'm never enough. And I think that especially when you become a university student and you sort of leave your small town, leave your immediate environment, your friends, your high school, you really, even as a high achieving person, can feel some sort of imposter syndrome, even if you have good grades and you're doing a lot of extracurricular activities. So it's definitely something that I struggle with now. And especially with social media, it seems like numbers are extremely important, followings, rankings. But then really that doesn't equate to any kind of happiness or life quality in the end. But I wanted to hear more about what others think about this and how their experience has been.
Yeah, totally. On some level, I completely relate to that. Like, in my high school of 100 people in our graduating class, I was a pretty big fish. I did a lot of stuff. I was head boy. I had pretty good grades and whatnot. And then I came to university and I was like, oh my God, McGill is all of Canada's big fish in one school. And more importantly, in our faculty especially, which was extremely competitive to get in, every single one of these people were the big fishes of their hometown, of their high school. And everywhere I looked around, I tried to stay involved in extracurriculars and my hobbies, like this podcast and stuff like that. There's always someone doing more than you. There's always someone with better grades than you. And it's tough. It's really tough. And in terms of McGill and university, sure, that's an experience that's existed for a long time. People have left their town and realized, oh shoot, there's actually smart people outside of my town and people that I can learn from. But then we square that with the internet. Oh my God, I was on LinkedIn the other day, and I know, and this 15-year-old requests to connect me, and her experience is co-founder of some nonprofit. What is it? Participant at she studied in a Harvard class. Took a summer course at 15 and got an A in it, and is doing all of these crazy things that. I'm not even doing at the age of 20, and I think of course this this kid is going to be super successful and she's going to go on to do great things and make our world a better place, hopefully. But I can't help but feel a little bit jealous and envious and think a little bit less of myself.
Yeah, I see where both of you are coming from, Vishwa and Milda. And Archie, this is a very interesting topic. Just firstly, this is not...
Thank you.
This is a very niche topic. You know, I love niche topics, so this is great. In my experience as a, I would say, as a kid, I wasn't big into school or overachievement until, I guess, my parents sort of guided me through that process and showed me what it is to do hard work. And then through my teenage years, I really, and especially when I moved to the Netherlands 4 years ago now, I really picked up the speed at which I wanted to do things. Like you say, my extracurricular list was piling up. And Vishwa, you bring up LinkedIn. I started that in high school already, and I talked to some people and they're like, why did you start so early? Like, what is all of this? You're pushing for something. I'm like, I don't know. It just felt natural for me. So Archie, to your point, is the do I feel the apparent pressure of social media, or you could say the digitized world, accelerating what I should be doing or appearing to accelerate, and feeling that pressure? I would say it's motivated, at least for me, by a lot of different factors that don't only coincide with the social realm, if that makes sense. I feel like pressure from family and friends, and also just wanting to do good. But being around an environment, in a competitive environment, which of course is accelerated by social media and to the level of achievement that one can reach. So yeah, I think all the viewpoints are very interesting.
Well, adding on to the kind of train of personal stories, I mean, again, very similar to you, Vishwa, sort of big fish, small pond. My graduating class was even smaller. I think it was 60, 70, 80 people. Again, head of school, top grades, whatever, came to McGill, realised that everyone had achieved that. And I know you've seen me struggle this year academically. For those that don't know, Vishwa and I sat together in a lot of classes. But yeah, it's definitely been tough. And again, I've had those experiences on sites like LinkedIn. But maybe moving away from the kind of discussion, our own personal experiences, one thing that I've found interesting when I've been thinking about this is we've got all these traditional metrics of success, GPAs, degrees, grades, etc. And of course, social media kind of brings in a lot of pressure to achieve, because you see other people, you see 15-year-olds going to Harvard and whatnot. But one thing I think it has changed is suddenly you can prove yourself outside of these metrics, right? So currently my GPA is not where I want it to be. And Vishwa said something to me a while ago. He said, mate, I think you're too smart to be in the spot that you're in, because the spot that I'm in isn't particularly great. It's not where I want to be. But if you look at a lot of people, they're building in public, they're building small startups and posting the journey on Twitter, the goods and the bads. You guys have your podcast and people can listen to this and go, hey, these are really smart people. They don't need to look at your GPA. They don't need to look at your transcript. What it's allowing us to do is to have almost simulate these conversations you can have with people without bringing up your GPA or grades, where they can walk away from that and go, hey, this person's really smart. So it's definitely, I think, democratizing access to smart people and democratizing, I don't like that word, but democratizing the ability to prove yourself outside of access to these institutions. So I guess I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on how it's changing how we show ourselves to other people in the context of success and achievement and careers and whatnot.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, actually. And I think that it's something that I'd been thinking of unconsciously, right? Because, my GPA is fine. It's not great. But in the context of, applying to scholarships, applying to jobs, applying to, certain academic positions and things like that, I really feel like I need to prove myself beyond the GPA these days. Unfortunately, most people are still using the GPA as a sort of cutoff of whether you even get your foot in the door. But there are so many ways that you can prove yourself beyond the traditional metrics of success. Now, I do think that this can also be manipulated in some ways, in that you can feign competence and knowledge very easily on social media, right? If you're a confident speaker and you talk absolute nonsense, like I tend to do on this podcast, you can pretend that you're a very, very intelligent person. Whereas, you're...
It's all starting to make sense now.
Yeah, exactly. You see where I'm going with this, Archie. I think that yes, it's democratizing access to success and to people sort of seeing what you're made of. But at the same time, it also opens up a possibility of a lot of people that are just skilled at social media or skilled at their crafting their public presence, people using that as a signal that they're skilled at something else when that may not necessarily be the case.
Yeah, I agree with Wishwa with this one. And in general, I feel like it's so easy on your LinkedIn or CV specifically to have all of these different positions like, oh, I'm council member of this and I've participated in this. But that doesn't really mean anything, especially when you're young and a teenager and have all of these opportunities to join places. But whether you actually take something from them is another question. And, especially as a person that's now like, I've had experience working as a teacher and in debate, specifically when you have to sort of also pick the next debate stars of Lithuania, let's say, and I'm part of the judging process and the selection process, and we ask ourselves, like, how do we democratize that? How do we make that sort of holistic? And I will always prefer the person that has an excellent work ethic and that is motivated and that, is respectful and has a good team spirit, as opposed to the person who has won multiple awards in debating or participated in international conferences. And I'm not saying that both of those can't be true, but I think that, I would always prefer, for example, having an interview with a person for a selection process instead of reading their CV or something.
Really interesting point, Milda. Because I think that vastly depends on what type of, Archie, I'm not sure if your question was looking at sort of application to jobs and how to display yourself, correct?
Yeah, take it where you want, but I guess that's sort of what I was getting at.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that when you look at, for example, universities, and they look at what's called your academic CV, the one that you write up before you apply to universities, and I think the three of us, or the four of us well know this, that they look, and especially universities that use bots to help moderate CVs or your LinkedIn profiles, they can actually weigh out certain candidates depending on some certain factors, like rules that the program has. Like, okay, if they didn't go to or do 10 extracurriculars or plus, they don't get into the selection, for example. That's an extreme example and a hypothetical one at that. But I think that some schools, in that sense, more look at the raw achievement. But what you're saying, Milda, and I very much agree with you, that if you're trying to select someone into a team or some place where you need someone reliable and efficient and professional, the quantitative factors, if that makes sense, aren't that much, don't yield that much over the qualitative of the actual person and what do they know and what do they experience.
All right, so I want to sort of shift the direction and talk about this abstract topic of success, because in my experience that has changed over the past few years, at least in the West, but also in the East. I think that if you look to the generation that most of our parents are in, their definition of success was, you know what, I'm going to get a job that pays well so that I can attract, let's take my dad, for example. I'm going to get a job that pays well so that, a nice woman wants to marry me, and then we can raise kids together, have a nice house, and live as a nice family. which is great. And that's what happened. And of course, my mom sort of had the same thing. They're both well educated and got basically their dream of success. But if you look at today, I don't think that that's what a lot of young people are sort of defining as success. They're defining something completely different. And I'm sure all of us have a different idea of what success is. But I think that there's sort of been, how do I say this, a decentralization of a universal definition of success within our generation. So I really want to explore whether that's good, whether that's bad, and what that means to all of you.
If I could pick that up. Yeah, I mean, going through school, I was always, okay, let's get the best grades possible. Let's learn another language. Let's go to the best university possible. And I think, by and large, I've been I've done that fairly well. But I think certainly in the last few months, I think this is why I've been thinking about this topic so much, is I've become somewhat disillusioned with, not completely, but somewhat disillusioned with the kind of how we square success and fulfillment and happiness and all of these things that do matter alongside success, right? Like, I was very much set on a career in finance, and that's what I was working towards at university, and I was doing these extracurriculars and taking the classes that were necessary. But I think part of that was because I wanted other people to see me having done it, right? I wanted to be that guy, and for other people to look at me and go, he's worked hard, he's smart, he's done it. And I think if you talk about your parents, and they were chasing that dream for all the right reasons, and building a family and building a life and all that. But what kind of irked me is that it would appear as though I'm doing that, obviously in the very early stages, and it would appear to me that I was doing that, but I think part of me knew that I was doing it for some kind of ego trip, because if you know that academically you're strong, it's fairly easy to sort of weaponize that in a sort of egotistical way and design your kind of personal brand at university around career success and grind culture and, oh, I left the library at 1 a.m. last night, look at me, right? And so I guess why I started thinking about how social media has changed things is suddenly now you can not go to university, maybe you're working on a project and you're building something, or maybe it's photography, maybe it's art, and you can be seen as hyper successful without doing any of that. And I guess as someone who was very much and is very much on the kind of traditional route towards success, however you may define it, as best as I can, part of me was sort of jealous that these people were doing it because, or at least as far as I could discern on social media, they were doing it because it was something they really enjoyed, right? Like, let's look at someone who's a photographer and they're posting their stuff online and they've been very successful in that domain. It's not a traditional domain. They haven't been to university, but they're doing what fulfills them and they're being successful at it. And I guess the question that I was posing to myself is that as important or maybe more important than these kind of traditional ideas of success that we've had, for years and years and years? So that's sort of my take on it, if someone else wants to pick that up.
Yeah, I can go now. I think what you say is brilliant, but especially when you come into university and you have all of these dreams about how you want to make your hobby profitable and live a life of happiness, a lot of them sort of go away very fast. And the same, for example, people in music or even people in podcasting, they might do the activity for years without seeing any success, without monetizing their content. And even if you love it dearly, still you need to feed yourself somehow. And a lot of times you have to forget that dream. So that's what's sad about it. But coming a bit more to the previous question about tradition, I can kind of comment from a woman's perspective that I think a lot of women in the West are not, as teenagers or even as bachelor students thinking about, okay, when will I have kids? When will I marry a husband? When will I settle down? They're not having that idea in their minds. So their life is not limited to that. And therefore they can explore more and follow with their career a bit further. So I think it's sort of liberating in that sense. But also I think with the liberation of LGBTQ individuals for example, for lesbians, they cannot have the idea in their head that I will marry a rich man that I can always depend on if my life goes wrong. They need to fully, trust in themselves and work very hard so that they have a financially stable life.
Or they can marry a rich woman.
Yeah, well, that's another discussion. But yeah. And then my third point that I want to say, sorry that I'm taking up so much time, but I feel like with us, my idea of success is kind of interlinked between, knowledge and money, since I think that's the most important still for me. And a lot of the times, many days, I find myself forcing myself to engage in intellectual activity, even though I don't want to, because I base my self-worth on that, and I believe that will bring me success. And yeah, it's just frustrating and annoying sometimes that I do that to myself.
Yeah, I actually, there was so much said that I've actually started to take a little bit of notes. And I kind of want to respond to some of the things, I think, in order to avoid myself rambling on for another 30 minutes. Archie, you said, and I quote, he's worked hard, he's done it, right? That's what you enjoy to see, or that's what you want people to see in you, right? Well, I'd actually like to bring up your wonderful Substack article here, and I took some notes as well, and I'm very interested because here, can I quote?
No, go ahead. I might have to pull it up so I know what you're talking about. But
okay, great. So it's here. Nobody films the hours at the library or in front of the piano, while hard work and a grind culture, quote, are glorified. They aren't glorified for their intrinsic value and improvement, but for a fully polished product that they hope to create, so we can post it in an online 2-minute video. I think that's an interesting, obviously there's that pressure to do really well, but you're saying almost deep down you're doing it because it's going to achieve something almost that's not going to benefit you in the direct sense. It's not self-fulfillment. It's fulfillment for someone else. It's what someone else told you to do. Am I not right there? Is that what you
Yeah,
meant?
I'm having that kind of panic where you're like, did I write that? I have no idea. Yeah, I mean... No, I stand by it.
Stand by your work, Archie.
I put this out there for a reason. I kind of wrote it and thought, you know what, that passes the test. I'll put that out into the world. I guess what I meant with that is, yeah, no one films. Let me pull up the bit that you quoted. Hang on.
It's a great. I enjoyed reading it.
There we are. Yeah, I suppose why I wrote that was because part of what bugged me is, and this isn't a particularly novel thought, part of what bugged me was we can celebrate these 2-minute videos online, but there's so many people out there who are putting in the hours, who maybe won't post it, or maybe do and it just doesn't get seen, who don't get celebrated. And I think that often discredits a lot of the work and can make people feel like, what am I doing this for? And that was a lot of what was bothering me about social media. Was there's a lot of value to be gained from hard work. I think that's fairly self-evident, and that can be personal and that can be, social. And part of what's gained is having people see it and having people celebrate you. But if you're not going to get that, and then you're discouraged from putting in the work, what you're also missing out on is kind of the intrinsic value and what that can do for yourself without ever putting it out there in the first place. And so I guess what was bothering me is I didn't want, I wrote this for myself just to get my ideas in order. What I didn't want is for me to put aside working hard because I was annoyed that people weren't giving me enough credit for it, and I wanted to be able to work because I enjoyed it and I found it fulfilling and I was doing something that fulfilled me and not for any other reason, right? That's kind of what bothered me.
No, I see. The reason I quoted that was because I felt it to be relatable.
Right.
I think a lot of people can relate with that. It's like that's why I think one of the happiest moments you can feel is when a friend or a family member actually says, you know what, you've done a good job. You've worked really hard, and they sort of gratify all that hard work and they appreciate the fact that you've done that. It's what makes anybody happy. right? It's like, oh, you've put so much effort into this gift. I know that's a small example, but I'm just saying the feeling. Imagine the feeling. So yeah, that was an interesting point. And quickly about tradition, I think Archie, you brought it up, and then Milda brought it up again. But anyways, I want to mention Milda, our econ professor. He had a quote, I guess, that I know, Milda, you may know, especially from rewatching his videos before the exam. But he says, the degree is nothing without the piece of paper. That's a synthesis of what it took him, I would say, 5-10 minutes to say. And he said, you could put in all of this work, right? You're going to put in this many hours. Look at the syllabus. You have to put in this many hours, during the lectures and for the exam. You can fail, and no one's going to care. Like, the guy was very brute about everything, which made it quite humorous, and that's his teaching style, I would say. But he said, unless you have that piece of paper that gratifies what you've done, shows your achievement, says, John Smith has received this diploma by the University of whatever. So I thought that was just an interesting thought and what that means to you.
I'm guessing your prof was explaining signaling.
Was explaining what? Sorry?
Was it signaling that he was explaining? Signaling and screening?
No, actually.
And avoiding moral hazard? No?
I don't.
That was the example that our prof used for moral hazard.
Maybe. Unfortunately, you know what? If I would have paid more attention to the actual material during the lectures, maybe I would have done it. But his quotes were always super memorable.
Something just came up in my mind that I wanted to ask if you guys also struggle with it. Danny, you were talking about how it feels so good to be appreciated and noticed, and I fully agree with that. But I always notice in my life that whenever I do achieve something huge, like win an award or say a speech in a huge conference or become even, the best speaker in the world, I never sit there and really wallow in my pride that I achieved this. I'm never like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you, girl. Like, you really did this. You're like the queen of the world. No, I'm like, let's get back to work. You still don't know anything. You still haven't achieved anything. And let's get back to it. And I feel like I really, really enjoy the process a lot more than the achievement, because the achievement signals some sort of ending. And you can't really sit in that anymore. You have to start working again. So what do you think about that?
If I could hop on that and kind of segue elsewhere, because it's a good segue. You talk about working hard and not being in it for the praise and the success at the end, but for the value that comes from working. One of the things I think about social media and success and ability and competence and all these things that I touched on my Substack, if you want to go read that.
Shameless plug.
Was
give it a plug right now.
Okay, it's called Where's Home. It's basically my ramblings on life and meaning and work and success and all these things. And I've only posted once so far, but I write it to get my just get my thoughts in order. It's not necessarily for an audience, but an audience is always good. Back to what I was saying. One of these things about social media is that, let's rewind 50, 60 years, right? Let's say you're really good at the piano and you live in a fairly small town and you're the best person in your town at playing the piano. And everyone kind of knows you for that. You're the music guy. And everyone's impressed with it and you've kind of built a reputation off it. And you're pretty good. But now, all it takes is to go online, go on TikTok, go on Instagram, 30 seconds of searching, and suddenly you can find a 7-year-old who's far better than you will ever be. And I think that can do a lot for your sense of achievement, the likelihood that you'll continue, the value that you get out of it. And obviously a lot of these things, particularly at such a young age, it's just to do with raw talent and not hard work. I mean, a 7-year-old has only had a few years to get good at the piano, and you might be 19 and you've been playing it for 10 years and you're just never going to be as good at them, just purely based on raw talent. And what I think this does for a lot of people is it's just discouraging, right? Like, if you don't have... Because of course we all do things for social clout. It's just part of what drives us forward as humans, and therefore, if you're kind of denied some of that, I think it's also denying people the intrinsic value that they get out of playing the piano, right? If it's something you enjoy, and suddenly you're so discouraged because you've seen these videos online, and then you're no longer doing something that you enjoy anymore. I think that's just a shame. And so moving away from kind of career success, academic success, just kind of personal hobbies and what social media is doing to that, I think I'd really like to hear your guys' thoughts.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. You know, I've been playing guitar for so long, and then I go on Instagram, I open up, and what is it? It's a 6-year-old playing Neon better than I ever will be able to play it. And it's just such a brutal feeling. But I think what tempers that feeling is sort of, I think that this is going to go in a slightly different direction, and I think it's going to go in a fairly heated a direction that I think will spark a little bit of disagreement. I personally think that we are tying success far too much to our own personal success in a field or like in sort of measurable ways. Like, how good are you at the piano? What college did you go to? What's your GPA? What is, did you start a nonprofit? Did you start a startup? And less in the ways that truly make us happy. Like Milda said, winning an award, having a great achievement, you don't really get to bask in that success for all too long. You say, you know what? Good job, pat yourself on the back once, back to the grind. You don't get to truly appreciate the joy that brings you. Whereas, you know, having a successful personal life, having a strong family, having a family that you care about, having a partner, having kids, those are the things that aren't temporary. Those are the things that last for a lifetime. And those are successes that can't necessarily be measured or shown to the outside world. Look, I have the best family in the world. I have started, they are so successful. They are blah, 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 blah. Really, there's no way to measure how good a family is. It's whether they make you happy or not. And if you look at people, the people that I consider to be the most successful are the people that have that in order. But I think that slowly we're moving away from that. And I think that is part of the reason why we're all feeling so unsatisfied with ourselves.
Yeah, but it's hard because it's so hard for people, for many young people, especially. You know, when you're young, you disagree with your family. And if you don't have a partner and you don't have many friends and you are in the grind set because you're so scared that you will be broke forever, your whole life becomes your work and your studies. And you get so caught up in that you can become depressed and sad and everything might seem meaningless to you. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. But yeah, I fully agree with you. Like, all of those things are super more important than work will ever be.
Yeah. Just a quick throw question. Have you ever watched Afterlife? Yeah?
Oh, what a series.
Okay, so only Vishwa is out of the picture. Just very quickly to like the log line of the series, because it connects brilliantly to this point. A man who works for a free paper company in Canberry, I think. Yeah, Canberry. Not Cadbury, that's the chocolate. Canberry.
I think it's a made-up town, so don't worry.
Yeah, it is a made-up town, yeah. Canberry. Tony lost his wife, Lisa, to, what was it? Breast cancer, I think?
Cancer.
Yeah, exactly. And he lost his entire life. And there's 3 seasons of it, and it's his story trying to get better, and this ties perfectly to this idea of what is success. There's a couple moments in the show where he talks to a friend on a bench near Lisa's grave.
I think I know exactly the quote that's coming.
Yeah, well, I don't know the exact quote, but he says, you know, I didn't make much money. I never amounted to much. I lived life slow. I drank a lot, but I had everything. You know, like this one person, it's not any quantifiable success. You can't put on LinkedIn. You can't say, well, I had 25 years of experience with my wife. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And the achievement amassed his entire existence. So if you look at success, that was Tony's marriage with Lisa. So if we talk about maybe what is personal versus professional success, that's something to maybe differentiate it. because the term success is so weighted in these very different avenues.
Yeah, I mean, I think personal success is a fairly well-defined thing. I don't think that's as highly contested these days compared to what it was as, say, professional success, because the value you get from having a family, from your personal relationships, it's a fairly unchanging thing. It's semi-biological, etc. I guess what I was getting at is, forget success for a second. Let's just talk about ability and competence and enjoyment in doing things. Going back to the example of playing the piano, because I really don't have much more to add on the family thing. I think I agree with everything that's been said, and anything I therefore say is just repetition. I just think that the level that's considered to be average these days keeps moving up, because suddenly there's someone a little bit better online, and a little bit better online, and a little bit better. And then you can practice as much as you were practicing before, just to keep your head above the water and just to stay average. And no one really enjoys the feeling of being average, right? You can become content with it, and that's, I think, what keeps a lot of people going, is suddenly you accept that you're not doing it for the praise of other people, and it doesn't really, and at that point it doesn't really matter what level you're at, in whatever domain this is, guitar, piano, football, doesn't matter. But I just think I don't know if I've got an issue with it, because it seems like a sort of immutable fact of the world these days. And it is good that everyone's getting better at everything just generally. But this kind of creeping forwards of what is considered to be just good enough, I think, isn't talked about particularly much, and is quite damaging for A, mental health, B, just pure enjoyment of doing things that you previously enjoyed.
I think that this is where it can kind of also get a bit political, because if such huge standards are put on regular people, and in order for you to deserve a good life, a house, like no debt, be able to send your kids to a good school, you need to be this wonderful person that has achieved mass success in your life, work 2 jobs if you're poor, I don't know, volunteer, like you have to be superb, which is so unrealistic, and just it's not a dignified life in any way, shape, or sense. People should get access to great services just for existing, because they deserve it, because they're trying to do their best with the competence and skills and opportunities they have. But yeah, to kind of follow up more on your question, I think some people just really are too trustworthy of themselves and think of themselves a bit too highly. I think we should all be a bit too critical of ourselves. Like,
Milda's part of the problem.
I'm never
We're all part of the problem.
I think, like, whenever I speak, especially if I'm, on a podcast, or if I'm making some sort of video, or even if I'm talking to some friends, I always think to myself, can I fact check myself? Like, can I source my idea right now? Can I find a source to what I'm saying? I'm like that kind of person. And I think that more people should be like this, because we really give too much credit to people who think that they're very good at something, but are really just overconfident,
I think,
people.
Of course, overconfidence is probably a bad thing, and people should do the work required to have an opinion on something, and not just spew unfounded ideas out. But I guess what I'm getting at least in kind of slightly less important areas that are just kind of personal interests and hobbies, should we not just allow people to be confident in where they're at, and not have them chasing this 7-year-old kid playing the piano online all day? I think that's what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I think that, especially when it comes to leisure activities, I was just talking to my brother. I was explaining what the podcast that we were doing was today, and he was like, "Comparison is the thief of joy," and that quote just really stuck in my head.
This man's got away with words. You know what I'm getting at.
He really has a way with
so
words.
Swarthy and unctuous.
So swarthy and unctuous.
That's an inside joke. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's an excellent point, right? Like, especially when it comes to the domain of things that you do exclusively for fun. But in some ways, I think that's just on you.
Yeah, I suppose I was just thinking after I just spoke, not we should allow people should allow themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
But also, I think people should in other scenarios, especially in cultures like mine in Lithuania, trust themselves a bit more. Like, people, they're so embarrassed to do anything here. Like, even if they're on vacation and, you know, people are dancing on the street because there's live music playing, they're like, oh no, I'm not having fun because I don't know how to dance. I will not join this fun party because I'm scared of showing myself to these people. Like, it's really their problem.
But I just think that whole attitude, and it's the same in the UK, and I think it's the same in most places, it just robs something from life that could be, right? If we could have more people dancing in the street because they don't care, or more people playing the piano even if they're not that good, I think all the better for it. And I think social media's got something to answer for that. Yeah,
this is why I'm always very, very kind. I mean, internally, I'd never be unkind externally, but I'm always kind. I'm always kind, even internally, to people that show up to an open mic and suck. You know what I mean? They're having a good time. They're putting themselves out there. I'm sure they're nervous. But, you know, if you're going to an open mic and singing a song, you're really just doing it because you like it. You know what I mean? And I think that we should just allow more people to enjoy what they do without expecting excellence from them. I didn't pay anything for the stupid open mic. I'm not going to get upset if you're a little bit pitchy on your vocals.
Fishwa, you remember that free gig of yours I went to recently and I didn't complain?
Ouch! Yeah, I do. I do remember that gig. Yeah, exactly. I'm kind to others because I want others to be kind to me. Clearly, Archie does not think the same.
I was very nice on the night.
That is true. That is true.
Same attitude as you, Vishwa, then. I had just wrap up my thoughts. I had a conversation with actually a student of my university who is in his late 60s, who I know through my family. He studies at my university. It's great. We sat down twice in 2 semesters for lunch, and the second time we talked about the difference between his first bachelor life and my first bachelor life. Like, what is the university experience? And he was like, man, there's so much pressure on you. There was no pressure on us, right? When I was your age, seriously, I had very average grades, as did everyone around me. You know, and we just played sports. We did things that we enjoyed. We went out, we hung out with friends, and we still ended up okay. I think from our perspective, it's very interesting because we're kind of at the cusp of that change, right? Where the job market and everything ahead is stressful, and it's hard to feel fulfilled.
Yeah, I completely agree. Does anyone have anything more to say on this topic? I think we should end on a positive note.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I think doom and gloom.
I think that we should tell our listeners that they ought to be what is it? They ought to be grateful. I think gratefulness.
I'd just say go pick up the guitar or the piano or whatever the hell it is and forget the person you see online. I'm going to stop looking at your guitar page because it makes me feel very poor at guitar. And just go.
I'm going to stop looking at John Mayer's.
Yeah, just do things because you enjoy them and go and be smart online. And if your GPA is going south, go north yourself and be fine.
And also, I guess I wanted to add that some people who listen to the podcast have told me, like, I know nothing about politics and I'm so lost, but your podcast helps me navigate the space a little bit. And I want them to know that I was completely the same. I felt so dumb, so out of touch, didn't know anything. But after literally like years and years of constant learning, only now something is making sense for me.
I still feel dumb.
Yeah, exactly.
I still feel dumb. Everyone's like, oh, how do you like talk about politics and stuff online? I'm like, bro, like, I just read a couple Wikipedia articles or a couple news articles and then talk.
That's the beautiful thing.
And so did the person in that polished 2-minute video. They also felt dumb. That's the thing.
That's the beautiful thing. Curiosity. Learn something new all the time and you'll be happy forever. Was that happy enough?
You know what, Danny? That's a great thing to end on. Very happy note to end on. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning into episode 30. I was actually just chatting with Milda. Like, we've been at this for over a year, and it's still going strong. Our numbers are looking decent. But, of course, always share the podcast with your friends.
Just remember, there's always a more successful podcast out there.
Precisely. There's always a more successful podcast, so help feed our egos by following us on Instagram and listening to our podcast and sending it to your friends. Have a great day.